I, Emma, always brought lasagna to my parents' house every Sunday, thinking it was family love. But that night, when I stood at the door, I overheard a horrifying secret they were planning to scam me out of $300,000 to get my brother out of jail. Will I forgive them or sever all ties? The drama-filled story starts here. By Emma. For most of my adult life, Sundays had a rhythm. I'd wake up late, take my time in the kitchen layering noodles, ricotta, and sauce into a lasagna, just like Mom used to make. Then, by 5:30 p.m. sharp, I'd be in my old gray Toyota, lasagna seat-belted in beside me like precious cargo, heading 40 minutes out of Chicago to the quiet suburb where I grew up. It was our thing. Every Sunday evening, no matter how crazy work got or how cold the Illinois wind blew, I'd come home. The red brick house always looked the same modest, square, safe. The porch light flickered like a familiar heartbeat. Inside, the scent of garlic bread and my father's deep laugh would greet me. Mom would hug me too long. James would pretend he wasn't hungry, and we'd eat together like nothing had ever changed. I used to think that kind of routine meant love. That evening, I parked in the usual spot under the lamppost, cradling the warm lasagna dish in both arms as I walked up the driveway. The windows glowed. I could hear faint laughter. I reached the front steps, balanced the casserole with one arm, and raised my free hand to knock when I heard my name. I froze. Emma's got the savings, Dad's voice said, low but firm. 300,000. That's more than enough to cover the mess James is in. My fingers curled tighter around the warm glass dish. She won't question it, Mom added. We tell her it's for the roof. Maybe medical bills. She's always been soft when it comes to family. Emma the dreamer, James said with a short laugh. Still thinks we're the Brady Bunch. She'll hand it over. She always does. My heart slammed into my ribs. They were talking about me like I was a mark. A mark they loved. Sure, but still a mark. I leaned closer, barely breathing. She gave me 40 grand when the vape shop failed. James continued. Didn't even ask for it back. And the 20 grand for your kitchen remodel. She thought it was a gift, Dad muttered. She's not stupid, Mom said, quieter now, but she trusts us too much. I'll cry a little. You'll tell her a story about when she was 5, and James will pretend to feel guilty. She'll write the check. There was silence. Then, laughter. I stood there, lasagna still warm in my arms, feeling my chest collapse inward. My throat closed, and something hot pressed behind my eyes. I was still on the porch, still technically a guest, yet I felt like I didn't belong anymore, like I was intruding on something foul and private. I didn't knock, didn't ring the bell, didn't let the smell of garlic or the sound of home lure me inside. Instead, I turned and walked back to my car like I was moving through water. The lasagna sat on the passenger seat, still warm, still perfect, like me, made with love, brought in trust, and completely unwanted. I drove through the streets I used to bike down as a kid, now blurred through the wetness in my eyes, my thoughts tangled. Were they always like this? Did I just not see it? Or had something changed? Had I changed? Had my independence, my quiet success, made me a target instead of a daughter? That night, the skyline of Chicago never looked colder. The glass buildings, the neon signs, the buzz of late-night traffic, they felt like walls instead of home. My apartment, high up and far away from everything that used to mean love, greeted me with silence. I placed the lasagna in the fridge, untouched. It stayed there for 3 days. In that silence, I started to question everything. Not just what I heard, but what I believed. That family protected each other, that love was unconditional, that coming home meant safety. I thought I knew them, but that night on the porch, listening to them plot, I realized maybe they never really knew me either, or maybe they did, and that's what hurt the most. I didn't cry on the drive home, not even when I merged onto Lakeshore Drive and the city lights blurred through the windshield. Chicago looked beautiful and distant that night, like a stranger wearing familiar clothes. Skyscrapers rose above me like silent judges, watching as I clutched the steering wheel with both hands, breathing through the weight in my chest. The lasagna was still on the passenger seat. Its smell, once comforting now, clung to the air like a lie. I couldn't stop replaying their words. She's easy. That was my father. The man who used to braid my hair before school when Mom was too tired. The man who once told me I was the smartest girl in the room, even when I was 10 and failing math. Emma, the dreamer. James had scoffed, always floating. No clue what's real. My brother. My only sibling. The boy I once helped build Lego castles with. The man I bailed out twice. Then came the worst. Not the scheming, not the dollar amounts, but my mother's voice. We can do it, she had said. Soft, complicit. She'll believe us. She always does. My mother, my best friend, my compass. The person I called at 2 a.m. after my first real breakup. The person who read every speech I gave at work. The one who said, just last week, we're lucky to have a daughter like you. Now I knew what she meant. They weren't planning to ask. They weren't coming to me in desperation. They were writing a script. Mom would cry. Dad would reminisce about my 5th birthday, the one with the unicorn cake. James would pretend to be sorry. He'd apologize for his mistakes and swear he was getting help. And I'd write the check, because I always had $40,000. That was my first holiday bonus at the ad agency. James needed help after a bad investment. $20,000 when he opened a vape shop with no business plan and no licenses. I drained my emergency fund to help him follow his dream. And now they wanted everything. My savings, my future, my trust. I pulled into my building's garage and sat there in the dim light. The lasagna had cooled completely. The glass dish fogged over, like it couldn't bear to see me anymore. I didn't move. Couldn't. Something inside me was breaking, but not the way I expected. It wasn't just pain. It was clarity. For 32 years, I'd lived like family was sacred, like love was about giving, like loyalty meant saying yes. But now I was starting to see the truth. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved what I gave. And I gave everything. Not just money, time, energy, silence. I let James make fun of my job because I thought he was insecure. I let Dad borrow my car just for errands and rack up speeding tickets. I let Mom guilt me into covering bills because we're family. Sweetheart. But none of it was enough. It never would be. The worst part, I wasn't even angry at first. I was ashamed. Ashamed that I let it happen. Ashamed that a 32-year-old woman with a solid career, a good head on her shoulders, and a healthy bank account still believed that love meant saying yes. I walked upstairs in a fog, lasagna in hand, and placed it in the fridge without thinking. It sat between a half-eaten salad and an unopened bottle of wine. Mocking me. That night, I lay awake listening to the city hum beyond my windows. My mind racing, I kept hearing their laughter after calling me easy, after mocking my dreams, after deciding I'd be their ATM with a smile. The image of my mother, not saying no. That broke something I hadn't realized was still whole. By morning, I knew. This wasn't just about money. It was about value. And I'd spent too long pretending I didn't deserve more. I stood at the fridge, opened the door, and stared at the lasagna. It looked perfect. Still edible. Still intact. But I couldn't eat it. I couldn't even touch it. It wasn't just food anymore. It was everything I'd lost and everything I was starting to find. I shut the fridge and took a breath that felt like the first real one in years. I wasn't going to be easy anymore. The Sunday after that night was the first time I didn't show up. No lasagna, no drive, no porch. Just silence. I sat in my darkened apartment, phone in hand, staring at the clock as it crept past 6. I could almost hear the silence echoing in that red brick house, the one where garlic bread usually crackled in the oven and James scrolled through his phone, pretending to care. I texted my mom. Hey, sorry I can't make it tonight. Work deadlines. Love you. A lie. One of the first I'd told them in years. The truth, I was staring at my laptop, opening a new bank account with a different institution, splitting my savings across 2 banks for the first time in my life. I enabled 2-factor authentication, set up transaction alerts, froze my credit, just in case. Each click felt like another stitch in a wound I didn't want to acknowledge, but had no choice but to tend. By the time I finished, my savings were protected, and my chest was tight with a strange combination of power and mourning. I wasn't just shifting money, I was shifting identity. At work the next day, everything felt too bright. My office sat on the 12th floor, facing the river. Boats glided slowly past glassy buildings as if the world hadn't cracked open beneath me. I sat across from Linda Harper, my boss and mentor of 6 years. A woman whose confidence filled every room without effort. You look like someone ran over your dog, she said, setting down her coffee and kicking off her heels. I laughed, but it caught in my throat. It's my family, I said. They're not who I thought they were. Linda didn't flinch. That sentence has destroyed and rebuilt more people than heartbreak ever could. Go on. So I told her, not everything, not the lasagna or the porch or the fact that I still hadn't thrown the damn thing out, but the money, the lies. The conversation I wasn't supposed to hear, the plan. She listened without interrupting once. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, You need a lawyer. And a therapist. Probably both. But let's start with the lawyer. I blinked. I thought you were going to tell me I was overreacting. She snorted. You're not. They don't get to weaponize your kindness. Her words landed like a slap and a hug. I swallowed hard. They're my family. They're also grown adults making choices. And now you get to make yours. She paused, then added, There's something else. We've been talking about expanding the London office. I wasn't going to bring it up yet, but you'd be the perfect person to lead the creative transition. 6-month assignment. Maybe longer. Fresh start. London. The word hit me like a gust of clean air through a dusty room. I stared at her, 100 excuses forming in my throat, my lease, my clients, my life here, but none of them sounded real anymore. Not after everything that had happened. Not after realizing how little of my life I'd actually built for me. Linda saw the hesitation. You don't have to say yes. Just don't say no because you're afraid. That night, I sat on my couch with a cup of tea going cold in my hands, staring at my phone as it buzzed. Mom, we missed you tonight. Sweetie. Everything okay, Dad? Hope work's not killing you. Let us know if you need anything. James, you mad or something? Call me. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my notes app and wrote down everything I'd ever loaned, given, or gifted to my family. The amounts, the dates, the excuses. It was the most painful document I'd ever created. But when I finished, I felt lighter. I wasn't erasing my past. I was just refusing to carry the burden of it alone anymore. The next morning, I emailed a lawyer Linda recommended, a real, sharply dressed woman named Margot whose bio read like a courtroom novel. I also scheduled a therapy consultation, something I'd promised myself 1,000 times but never followed through on. By midweek, I was researching short-term housing in London. By Friday, I had a meeting on the books with the HR department to discuss the transfer. Each action felt like cutting a string that had once tethered me to something important but had since turned into a noose. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it also felt clean, like scrubbing a deep wound, like finally breathing air that wasn't filtered through guilt. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to my family. I was choosing me. And as terrifying as that was, it was the first time I'd felt truly safe. The silence didn't last long. By Monday, my phone was vibrating constantly, calls, voicemails, texts, all from the same names I'd once cherished. At first, the messages sounded concerned. Sweetie, we're worried. Are you okay, Mom? Call me. I'm losing my mind over here. Dad, what the hell is going on, James? I didn't answer. And then, they changed. The worry turned into frustration. You're being ridiculous. This is family business. You're hurting people who love you. You're acting like a stranger. Maybe I was. Or maybe, for the first time, I was acting like someone who finally saw the truth. Then, 3 days into the silent standoff, James showed up. He knocked twice before trying the door handle, like maybe I'd forgotten to lock it out of habit. I hadn't. I stood still in the kitchen, heart pounding, staring at the door through the peephole. He knocked again. Emma, come on, open up. I took a breath, then opened the door just enough for the chain lock to hold. He looked the same. Same smug grin. Same fleece-lined jacket he always wore when trying to look harmless, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. I just want to talk. I nodded, unhooked the chain, and let him in. He walked around like he owned the place. Jesus, you've been avoiding everyone. What's going on? Mom's freaking out. Dad's not sleeping. You could have at least picked up the phone. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You mean after I overheard you plotting how to steal $300,000 from me? His face went slack for a second. Just a second. Then the performance kicked in. That's not fair. You misunderstood. It was just stress talking. We didn't mean you called me easy. My voice was flat. A dreamer. You laughed about how I always fall for it. He scoffed. You're twisting things. No, I heard you. All of it. Mom crying on cue. Dad telling childhood stories to soften me up. You pretending to be remorseful. It wasn't stress. James. It was a script. His jaw clenched. So that's it. After everything we've been through, you just walk away. You abandon your own family. No, I said. Voice steady. You abandoned me the moment you decided I was a bank account instead of a sister. He stormed out without another word. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like being set on fire and choosing not to scream. But I didn't have time to fall apart, because the next bomb dropped at work. I was leading a presentation for a new account when reception buzzed me. Emma, there's a woman here. Says she's your mother. I froze. And then, there she was in the office, crying. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, looking 10 years older than she had the week before. She didn't even wait to get to a private space. Emma, please. It's your brother. He's going to jail if we don't pay. I know we made a mistake. God knows I didn't want this, but we're desperate. My coworkers stared. Someone silently offered her tissues. My hands curled into fists. I know everything, I said coldly. I heard the plan. You were a part of it. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. Please, she whispered. You've always been the good one. That's exactly why it ends here. I turned and walked away, heart pounding in my throat. My legs felt like rubber, but I didn't look back. 2 days later, I got the legal notice. They were suing me, claiming the money I gave James and my parents over the years was a series of informal loans they expected repayment for, and that my recent refusal to engage had caused them emotional distress. It was surreal, like they were trying to rewrite history with lawyers and paperwork, like kindness was something I had to apologize for. But Margot, my lawyer, was unshakable. "They're trying to intimidate you," she said. "They have no case. You have a clean record, transaction history, and no written agreements. Let me handle this." So I let her. The hearing took place in a small courthouse in downtown Chicago. Just me, my lawyer, and the 3 people who used to be my world sitting across the room like strangers in old skin. James looked defiant. My father looked tired. My mother, she couldn't meet my eyes. The judge threw the case out in under 20 minutes. Margot didn't even break a sweat. As I stepped outside into the cool wind of a Chicago afternoon, I felt something lift, not joy, not relief, but space. Breathing room. They couldn't touch me anymore. They'd tried guilt. They'd tried begging. They'd tried shame. And now they'd tried war. And I was still standing, inside that courtroom. I finally saw them not as family, but as people. Flawed, selfish, familiar, but no longer mine. And I didn't feel grief. I felt freedom. The lasagna was still there, sitting in the back of the fridge like a ghost that refused to leave, covered in aluminum foil, untouched, quiet. It had become a monument to Sundays, to guilt, to who I used to be. On the morning I signed the final paperwork for the London transfer, I stood in front of the fridge, staring at it. I pulled it out, peeled back the foil. The cheese had solidified into a thick, cold slab. The smell had faded, but I swore I could still sense the echo of warmth that once meant love. I carried it to the trash, paused, then, without ceremony, dropped it in. The thud it made wasn't loud, but in my chest, it roared. I didn't cry. Not this time. Later that afternoon, I sat on my bed and scrolled through my messages. There were 5 missed calls from my dad, 7 from my mom. James had texted again. "Emma, please." "I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do." I stared at his name for a long moment, then hit block. Mom's last message was a wall of words: regret, confusion, denial, a request to talk like a family again. At the very end, a sentence stood out: "I'm sorry if we made mistakes." I typed a reply, paused, edited, and sent. "I hope you all choose to change, but I'm not waiting anymore." That was it. No guilt, no longing. James was sentenced to 18 months in prison for fraud. My parents lost the house after defaulting on multiple loans. They moved to Florida. I didn't know where exactly. I didn't ask. And to my surprise, I didn't feel much. Not anger, not grief, just detachment. The kind that doesn't come from hate, but from healing. The day I left Chicago, it was overcast. The sky matched the mood of the city I'd once adored. As the plane lifted off, I looked out the window and watched the skyline shrink. The Willis Tower, the river, the grid of streets that once held so much history. I let go. London greeted me with soft rain and cobblestone streets that felt like stories waiting to be told. I moved into a cozy flat in Notting Hill, the kind with creaky floors and old windows that opened outward. There was a tiny bookstore around the corner, a coffee shop that already knew my order by week 2, and a riverwalk where I spent quiet evenings just breathing. I made friends. Slowly, genuinely. People who didn't want anything from me except laughter over dinner and maybe a shared bottle of wine. I learned how to be alone without being lonely. I started therapy. I picked up sketching again. I stopped checking my phone every 10 minutes. And most importantly, I began to trust myself, not the edited, performative version who always said yes, but the real me. The one who could say no and still be worthy of love. One evening, I stood on Waterloo Bridge watching the sun dip below the Thames. A man beside me played a soft tune on a violin. The city pulsed with life, not demanding anything from me, just letting me exist. I thought of the girl who stood on her parents' porch, lasagna in hand, frozen in place by betrayal. I wasn't her anymore, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to be. Family, I'd learned, isn't who shares your DNA. It's who shows up when you're silent, who respects your boundaries, who doesn't turn your love into currency. Sometimes, loving yourself means walking away, even if you leave everything behind, even if all you take with you is a plane ticket, a clean start, and a promise that you'll never shrink again to make someone else feel bigger. That was the beginning of me, and God, it was beautiful.